Republicans are laying the groundwork for repealing Obamacare. I guess Trump wants to do it. He said during the campaign that it's a total disaster and has to go. But then he met with Obama and came out and said, you know, some of those Obamacare provisions I like very much. But then his advisors got to him and then he was back to it has to go. It sort of depends on who the person is that spoke to Trump 5 minutes ago. That determines which way he wants to go. So let's forget about Trump for a second. Republicans are moving ahead with the infrastructure to destroy the Affordable Care Act. And a few things have been done in the last 48 hours, really the first 48 hours of the new Congress. Number one, there's been a budget resolution introduced by Chairman Mike Enzi to jumpstart the budgetary maneuver known as reconciliation. And this is how Republicans would be able to avoid a Democratic filibuster in the upper chamber. And it starts the procedural process for repealing or defunding pieces or aspects of the Affordable Care Act. Here's the really rich part. I mean, this is just incredible how you have to hand it to them in terms of the evil genius creativity. Republicans, led by Steve King of Iowa, real piece of work, they've come up with a bill which would ban the Supreme Court from citing their own prior Obamacare-related cases for the purpose of precedence in all future cases. Here's a quote from Steve King in a press release. It was my first order of business on the morning after Obamacare passed into law, March 24th, 2010, to draft and introduce my full 100% repeal of Obamacare. By prohibiting the Supreme Court from citing Obamacare cases, we will be truly eradicating this unconstitutional policy from all three branches of government so that the repeal will be complete. The bill claims that under Article 3, Section 2, Congress is allowed to, quote, provide exceptions and regulations for Supreme Court consideration of cases and controversies. So, two thoughts on this. Number one, that is not meant to tell the Supreme Court how to evaluate cases. What that provision is meant to do, as we heard from a number of legal experts, that's there to tell the court that their jurisdiction can be limited on particular issues. So you could use Article 3, Section 2 to tell the court, here's one area that we are removing from your jurisdiction and you don't need to accept cases with this regard. It's not there to allow politicians to tell the supposedly independent judiciary what information or evidence or prior rulings they can and cannot consider when talking about a particular issue. So this matters because precedent is one of the most important aspects of the American judicial system. If you tell the Supreme Court you can't consider your past opinions on this issue, you're actually eliminating a lot of the infrastructure under which the Affordable Care Act has already been examined and upheld as constitutional by courts up to and including the Supreme Court. Will this work? Well, like I said, it shouldn't. It shouldn't work because this is not the point of Article 3, Section 2, but you have to activate around this. And you can actually call the governor's office for this. As we've talked about before, the Medicaid expansion component of the Affordable Care Act is something that individual states have the freedom to decide whether or not to accept. I assure you that there will be Republican governors who have opted into the Medicaid expansion. If they get enough calls from constituents saying, hey, do not allow this to happen because I will lose my Medicaid, which I now have because of the expansion that you signed into law, that will get the attention of governors. And usually it's, well, call your member of Congress, call your representative. Governors are much more administrative as elected officials than are senators and members of the House. You have to activate, call your governor's office, but also you of course should always call your local elected officials. I always thought that the Supreme Court was a separate branch of government. I always thought Republicans wanted small government and to allow for an independent Supreme Court. All of a sudden, you've got the Republican Party violating small government principles by starting to get involved with the Supreme Court and telling them what you can and can't consider when you rule on a particular issue. And they are also attempting to eliminate the independence of the Supreme Court. This is America under Donald Trump, or at least it will be in about 16 days. Thanks for watching this video. Before you watch the next one, remember, we're raising money to expand the David Pakman Show big league, as well as expand progressive activism. Go to davidpakman.com/donate. Donations of any size are much appreciated.